PhillyStartupLeaders.org presents the 2010 FounderFactory Conference, recorded November 17, 2010, at the World Café Live in Philadelphia. Brought to you by Morgan Lewis, providing comprehensive transactional, litigation, labor and employment, and intellectual property legal services to clients of all sizes, from global Fortune 100 companies to just-conceived startups across all major industries. On the web at morganlewis.com. And by Chariot Solutions, an IT consulting firm specializing in application development and systems integration using Java and open source technologies. On the web at chariotsolutions.com. And by Cone Partners, an independent insurance brokerage that delivers integrated solutions to meet client needs in business, benefits, life, and personal insurance. Also by Monetate, the leading independent provider of testing, targeting, and personalization for websites. On the web at monetate.com. And by Leadnomics, an industry leader in lead generation and performance marketing. On the web at leadnomics.com. In this episode, Fishbowl number 2, Scalability, with presentations by Urban Escapes and Greenfire.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Joe Gualiardo from Pepper Hamilton.
Good afternoon, Aaron McLean from 811, and also Philly Startup Leaders.
So Aaron, I understand that the next speaker has something to do with this venue. Is that right?
You mean Hal, the founder of World Café? No, I can't imagine he'd have time for us today.
But wasn't FounderFactory looking for somebody to talk about business sustainability? He would have been great for this.
Yeah, actually, I think World Café was founded in 2004, so they've been around for, 6 years now?
Yeah, just a terrific organization. I know a bit about this venue. It's amazing how they've been so successful, in particular during this economic downturn. In fact, I think they're opening up another venue in April 2011.
Yeah, so if we wanted someone to talk about growth and sustainability, we'd probably like someone from World Café, wouldn't we?
Yeah, I think we probably would. Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, the founder and president of World Café Live.
Please give a warm welcome to Hal Real. Thanks.
Thanks for being here at World Café Live. We're honored to host this. We are definitely the clubhouse for music, but I'd say if there was a second thing we're a clubhouse for entrepreneurialism. We have hosted lots of events, including FounderFactory before. I've done a lot of work with Wharton, a lot of work with the Biata Center at Drexel, and lots of other organizations. So we're really proud to be considered entrepreneurial and innovative. How'd I do, Amy? Okay, and I'm paging down right there?
Yes.
Okay, great. I should be able to screw it up just fine, good. So before you get to know me a little, I want to get to know you a little bit. And let's see, dare I put this microphone down, Jorgen? So first of all, how many WXPN listeners do we have in the audience? That's pretty good, okay. How many WXPN members do we have in the audience? Yeah, that's an interesting model, right? Poor WXPN, it's kind of like their business model is, it'd be like going to an Eagles game and for free for the first 100,000 people who can squeeze in. And if you liked it, well, you determine how much you like it by putting money in the box on the way out. It's a tough model next door, but they're a great asset to Philadelphia and the country. Great public radio station. Let's see, how many of you have been to World Café Live before? How many for a concert? Wow, that's great. How many of you played an instrument growing up or sang, not just in the shower, but okay? How many of you still play an instrument? Okay, that's sort of like the ratio of the XPN listeners versus members, right? How many of you have kids who you make play instruments? Okay, right. How many of you go to concerts of any sort? Anywhere, classical, rock and roll, whatever. And how many of you listen to music in your car, at home, or at work? Almost everybody. And last one, how many of you have a special song or two that takes you back to, for better or worse, a certain moment in your life? Just about everybody. So the moral of that story is that music is incredibly powerful and a much more important part of our lives than we realize. We take it for granted, kind of like, drinking water and knowing that there's water to drink. We really do. Music plays an important role in almost everybody's life. It's something that is shared, that creates bonds with family, with friends, that brings you back to special moments in a way that nothing else can. Music is really powerful and very important to all of us. And you're going to hear a little bit of my story and the World Café Live story, and what I'd like you to keep in mind is it's a story about how the power of music is being harnessed to build a company that's based on building community through innovation and collaboration. So, you're only hearing about the music business and the business of music through the eyes of one entrepreneur here. And just quickly about my background, you might wonder how I got here. I am a serial entrepreneur. Often when I lecture somebody, you'll ask me, especially high school kids, how do you know if you are? And I said, well, because you just can't help yourself. I know there's a lot of people in this room who feel that way. So when I was 14 and I had too many babysitting jobs, I started Nighty Night Babysitting Service, and I pimped for all my friends. And at its peak, I had 200 sitters paying me 50 cents a night for getting jobs for them, because my dad was a printer, so I had bumper stickers and cards and a great logo, like an old, maiden-looking lady with a baby upside down with a paddle, need a sitter, call Nighty Night. And it was really rocking until my dad's insurance agent said, if one of those kids burns a house down, you're done. And that was it for Nighty Night. Traded that in for my first keyboard and learned to make some money from playing music. In 1974, I stopped playing piano for money. An important part of my story is that when I was a freshman at Kenyon College, my goal in life was to be the next Chick Corea, Keith Jarrett, Herbie Hancock, an improvisational jazz pianist, because that's my love. Unfortunately, an important part of my journey, my dad dropped out of a heart attack when I was a sophomore early in that year, and he was about 50. And so I spent the next 3 years to stay in school playing my little hands off, playing whatever drunk in whatever bar or whatever fraternity party requested so I could make the money to stay in school. So by the time I graduated, I decided that the music was more about this than about making a living, and I kept it for myself. I went on to a successful real estate law career, had my own firm, had the great fortune of working with a great Philadelphian who died a few years back, Bill Rouse, who was responsible for Liberty Place, the Convention Center, the Kimmel Center, Great Valley Corporate Center, and whose company is now Liberty Property Trust, one of the country's biggest real estate investment trusts, New York Stock Exchange traded. A great guy and a great mentor and a great Philadelphian. At the same time, because I was a serial entrepreneur, I was involved in different businesses. One of them became pretty successful, Data Protection, Inc. It was sold to a larger company that was then sold to Iron Mountain, a company you've probably heard of. And I've always been very active, and this is an important part of my story too, in the community with various hats, from the arts community to the business community. Most recently, I was the chairman of the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance. I think it's really not so altruistic as to say it's all about giving back. You get what you give. And I know that I've gotten at least as much, if not twice as much, from what I've given through my community activities. It's been a terrific part of my story. But notwithstanding all that great stuff, in 1998, I kind of reached a crossroads. I had sold my data protection company. I had won $100 from my best friend who said that I was permanently unemployable and that whatever I did, I shouldn't sign a contract with the company that bought my company. So I signed a 2-year earn-out, and the day after my 2 years was up, I got my $100 from John, and then I quit. And now I was at a great crossroads and trying to decide what to do next. And I was very fortunate, not that I'd made enough money from selling that company to retire, but I did have the opportunity to take a break. And one of the reasons was my wife, who had been my partner in the law practice, went in-house when Liberty Property Trust was created. And she and Bill Rouse, who was disappointed I wasn't going to keep practicing law, but I'd done that, been there, and put it behind me, all challenged me to say, well, why don't you take a break now and really then figure out what you want to do with the rest of your life. So, it's something we all dream of, to get that blank piece of paper. But when you actually have the opportunity, it's very daunting and scary. And again, it was Bill Rouse who said to me, well, here's what I think you ought to do. You ought to take this blank piece of paper and forget what people think is fiscally possible or realistic, and don't worry about what people think of your ego, and write down what you would do if you could do anything in the world that you wanted to do. And this was all in a framework of feeling that although I'd had a pretty successful career of about 20 years at that point, something was missing. And I really wanted to find what it was that would allow me to pursue my passion, but combine that with my considerable background in both business and law. So I took the challenge and I wrote down on the piece of paper that I would radically change the landscape for contemporary music audiences and artists. And right after I wrote that down, then I looked in the mirror and said, who the hell do I think I am? That's a pretty large task. And I decided, well, let's break it down into bite-sized chunks, bite-sized being a relative term. And I decided the first chunk was, let's reinvent the live music experience. Nothing to it. And by that, what I really meant was, you've got to start with the small questions. So I thought, especially as somewhere between 25 and 30, I noticed that so many of my friends stopped going out to hear new live music, and in particular, new live music. And, I grew up, I'm a lot older than a lot of the people in this room, but some of you are my peers, going to the Main Point in Bryn Mawr, hearing the unknowns that are now very well known, the Bruce Springsteens, Bonnie Raitt's, Joni Mitchell's, sometimes in the same night, with 100 people, and having this incredible experience of this authentic, intimate experience of discovering a new artist and what they're about. And somehow that really had gone away by the end of the 70s and through the 80s. And so I'd find myself closing some big deal in some city in the country, and everybody would say, oh, let's go out and get drunk and have a big dinner. And I'd say, let's go hear some music. And most people would say, nah, let's go have dinner and get drunk. And I found this pretty disappointing. And even my friends in Philly stopped going out to hear live music because, most of the places were dives, the sight lines were bad, the sound was bad, there were rarely any seats for people who wanted to be seated, the floors were sticky, on and on and on. Sometimes it went real late, and always it was a hassle. You had to figure out, well, how are we going to get from our respective jobs to where we're going, find a place to get something to eat, then get to the venue, then catch the show, and get home and get a decent night's sleep before work the next day. So on a weeknight, it really became a challenge. And as I did a little bit of study of the landscape to make sure this wasn't just my intuition, it was interesting. In 2003, a year before we opened World Café Live, but long after I started down this road, there was an article in Billboard that talked about 80 million customers with no place to go, and basically talking about the baby boomer music buyers who were born between 1946 and 1964. And also between 1991 and 1999, as buying music became less popular for a new generation, buying music became more popular, as popular as ever and even more popular for the older generation, for the boomers. So I trademarked a phrase that I hope I don't get in too much trouble in the house. I know, Curry, I see you won't tell anybody, and whoever else is in here, you're sworn to secrecy. I trademarked a phrase called live music for grown-ups. And with the phrase live music for grown-ups, and the reason I say I get in trouble is because immediately my marketing folks said, well, first of all, grown-ups don't want to act like grown-ups when they go out, and they don't want to be reminded they're grown-ups. And secondly, it sounds like you're excluding the younger listener. Well, it was really about live music for music lovers. But I got to tell you, if you have to have your business plan in a quick elevator speech, live music for grown-ups worked, because I raised $3 million pretty quickly with a bunch of foam boards about our physical plans and the phrase live music for grown-ups. People said, oh, a place where we can go where our feet won't stick to the floor, where the sound will be good, and yada, yada. So 7 years without much sleep, and we had the good fortune of bringing this to reality. Now, I promise I only have 2 slides that are Hal Real's Entrepreneurialism 101, 102. So I'm going to insert those right now, and then we'll get back to more about keeping on, and how we sustain this enterprise and hope to sustain it for the future. When I write the book, a great Nick Lowe song that he performed on this stage just a few weeks ago. So here's my definition of an entrepreneur. A person who accepts the status quo is a stoic. A person who resists it is a whiner. A person who rejects it is a nuisance. And a nuisance with a gold card is an entrepreneur. And that's kind of how we set down that road. And my other little teeny pearls of wisdom, because it's much more important to know what you don't know, and I don't know a lot more than I do know. But I sort of have my own 5 Ps of entrepreneurship. And the first one is purpose. I don't use mission, it sort of sounds religious to me. But I guess when you combine the first 2, purpose with a passion, as I do, it kind of does get religious. It's so interesting, I think, when I talk to, again, like high school level entrepreneurs, everybody's interested in getting rich quick. And everybody says, I don't understand. The purpose is to make money. What other purpose would there be? You're starting a business. And I try to explain to them that most of those businesses that you think were overnight successes, and it used to be Bill Gates was the example, and now some of them are so naive as to think that Steve Jobs is the example of overnight success, that if the entrepreneur didn't have a passion besides making money for what it was they did, it would never have happened, and that money flows out of that passion. So you need a purpose, and you need a passion for that purpose. You need people, you need partners, and I mean that in all respects. So I'm very proud of the building of World Café Live, what we're in physically, but it doesn't mean anything without this incredible crew that makes World Café Live happen, that creates most of the events, that brings the talent, that brings FounderFactory here. And by the way, they've taken good care of you today, so how about let's hear it for them. Jorgen on sound, Carrie and Quill and Goozy, Chef Coleman is somewhere in here. Thank you very much. So, and it takes partners. 53 angels put up $3 million to launch this puppy. It took development partners. It took Carl Dranoff, the developer, who was willing to take a chance. It took Penn. It took WXPN. It took a lot of partners. And then, of course, it takes the purse. No ifs, ands, and buts about it. It takes purse. People always say to me, you must just be living the dream. You get up every morning and all you think about is the music. Well, let me tell you, it took 7 years to get it open. We've been open for 6 years. The morning that I wake up and the M word I'm thinking about first is music instead of money, you'll probably hear me be screaming in joy. It always takes money. I don't care what the business is, what phase you're in. You can't grow it, you can't expand it, you can't capitalize it. You've got to have the purse. And last, even if you have all 4 of those elements, it's persistence, persistence, persistence. And that's also the key to sustainability in my mind. So, I wanted to be a rock and roll star. It was easy, right? We had a runway, which was a ready and willing marketplace starved for a different kind of live entertainment experience. We had a destination to reinvent live music. We had a flight plan. Great sound, clear sight lines, fabulous food, drink, and service. All we needed was a plane. We had some liabilities. No music industry experience, no food and beverage experience, and no investors. Other than that, we were really looking good. Now, I did have one asset, which was I had a great track record of successful collaboration and had delivered on prior harebrained schemes, mostly after they started out as a disaster and eventually we turned them into something. I had 20 years of strong relationships, goodwill, and a good reputation in the business community, the arts community, and the community at large. And as all we entrepreneurs suffer from, I had 100% confidence in my vision. So we engineered the plane, we built the right team, but that didn't happen overnight. I learned in the first year a phrase that certainly my wife never wants to hear again. We always said we were building the plane in flight. Every day after the plane took off was a new adventure in this place. And the first year was brutal. And building the right team, it's pretty interesting as I look back over 6 years, because what I learned was that the best people in the two riskiest businesses on the planet, food and beverage and entertainment, do not leave a safe job to jump into a new entrepreneurial boat. Oh, lots of very successful people in both the restaurant industry and the entertainment industry came to me and said, this is a fascinating idea, way to go, that's great. And I'd say, so do you want to be part of the team? They'd say, I'll give you a call in a year, well, let's talk. Because they were all betting that we were going down. So building the right team. Enlisting a strategic partner with strong credentials and a stake in the game. So we're going to come back to that in a moment. And stand on the shoulders of other risk-taking giants, namely my investors. So WXPN, people ask how that came about. Well, it didn't take me too long, too many brain cells, to figure out that I wanted to do something radical, something that spoke differently to audiences and artists. And I knew that Hal's Bar and Grill was going to take a long time and a lot of money to brand as something that gave it instant credibility with artists and audiences. I was an XPN member, an XPN fan, and I had a lot of respect for what XPN had accomplished. I didn't know XPN particularly well, but one of the things I knew that was really important to my concept was that every summer XPN, even back then and still today, does a festival down by the river. And normally, when we all go out for a public event, we do this. If this is a person next to me, we kind of go like this, because we want our space. But when you go to the XPN Music Festival, it's kind of like coming to FounderFactory. Everybody's like, hey, how you doing? Are these your kids? Don't you love that artist? Wow. And you see 10,000 people having this love fest. Well, I said to XPN, given some changes on the horizon, why wouldn't you want to create a clubhouse for that community that you have that they can go to all the time? Why should it be just once a summer? And some of the changes I mentioned is that in 1998, when I approached XPN with this concept, the FCC, very important to this model, the FCC had just changed the rules regarding ownership of multiple radio stations in multiple markets, so that it was pretty clear to us who had looked at it that the radio business was about to get rolled up. Satellite radio was still just talk, and there was no such thing as a clear channel company. Now, fast forwarding to today, what was pretty obvious to a lot of us back then, in the top 100 markets in the country, 70% of the contemporary music stations, by that I mean whether it's R&B, it's the MMR, it's indie rock, it's gospel, it's oldies, those kinds of stations are owned by basically two companies. And they really don't care about the next Bob Dylan. I mean, I'm a capitalist too, but they only care about the next Britney Spears and selling more beer. There's got to be something more to it, right? Well, XPN had this great reputation, and more importantly, they had a 7-year-old show that was called World Café. And that show now, fast forwarding, is going into its 20th year. At that time, there were 40 markets that the show was syndicated to in the country. It's now carried in over 200 markets. It's the most listened to contemporary music show on all of radio, not just public radio. And everybody who is anybody got a start on that show. 20 years ago, Sheryl Crow, before she had a recording contract, was strumming her guitar in the old XPN studio, as did Dave Matthews, as did Norah Jones, and the hits keep on coming. So I came to XPN and I said, so I have this idea. Let's create a clubhouse for the Philadelphia music community, and in particular for your fans. And let's add to that clubhouse, let's make it a place for musicians and audiences. Let's create one, or if we're really nuts, 2 live music venues. We were really nuts, with full restaurant and bar service. Now, just so you know, XPN is owned by the university. The university gives it no financial support, but the FCC license is owned by the university. It's a professional public radio station, not for the kids. They do some interning and stuff. But it is part of Penn. Before we even got to Penn's approval, it took 2 years for the station to decide, yes, this seems like a great idea, and to come back to me and say, yes, we think you're the guy we would trust our brand with, because I proposed to them, if they didn't want to do it and take the risk, I might, but they'd have to license the World Café name to me. And they said, and yes, you're the guy to do it with, as long as you take all the risky part and you include what we need as part of the package. And I said, great, you made a decision, let's go. So here we were. XPN was seeking a state-of-the-art facility for its broadcast studios and business offices, and World Café Live was looking for a great space in which to build 2 world-class music venues and restaurants, and neither of us had any money. So that was 2 years into it, and over the next 5 years, we put together the necessary collaboration. We raised $3 million in equity, $1.5 million in debt, and XPN raised $4 million from a capital campaign that they told me they would never be able to do, that they did very successfully with a lot of help from me. And you know, that's an interesting story too. The reason I was confident was, no offense to my dear friends and partners next door, but a capital campaign for WXPN to have new studios, most of their listeners would have gone, oh, that's nice. Is it really going to make a difference in my life? Am I going to really hear a difference? Are you going to be able to do that much more? But when they got on the air and they said, we're going to build this really cool place that's going to have our new studios and 2 live music venues and a physical extension of that experience you get from hearing David Dye introduce you to new music in your living room, now there's a living room we can all go to. We set the public radio record in a day and a half, raised $1.5 million on the air for this concept. So I felt pretty good that day. My $3 million, originally now $5 million plus, came from convertible preferred stock in our parent company. And they're all angel investors. I had a couple of angels come to me early on and say they would each do $1 million. And I said, no, thank you, because I really wanted a grassroots group that would have this be their place and that would help drum up support for it. So we had 55 angels who are in from $25,000 to $450,000, plus what I have in the deal. So 7 years and a collective amount of $15 million later, we opened World Café Live and WXPN at 3025 Walnut. And as some of you have heard me say before, when it started, I was 6'2" and had all dark hair, and now what you see is what you get. I'm just going to take a minute because I think this is kind of interesting. Actually, it's about 3-4 minutes. When we got to this stage and we were open, we had people come here from all over the world. We have from day one. And although it's a real compliment, I'm still trying to figure out what it is that makes people walk in the building, especially when we're going on all burners, and they say, hey, we need one of these for our university, our city, our town, our village. It's been very interesting. And, you know, during the opening years, before I was sure, we always did this with the notion that we were going to build a brand, build a platform, and we hoped to expand. But we were only going to expand intelligently, which means if it couldn't make money and it couldn't work, we wouldn't do it at all. But everybody knew the plan was that this was a long-term strategy to establish what we hope becomes a national institution. And it wasn't going to be a quick hit for anybody. And so somewhere along the line, I guess about 3 years into it, I had been talking with people in Des Moines, of all places. Iowa Public Radio decided they were going to build a new home for their statewide network, and they really wanted World Café Live to be part of it. But they couldn't get, normally my answer to people is, great, get all the interested stakeholders to come and see what we are, because they don't get it unless they're here. Somebody said, can't you do like a DVD instead of all the written materials on the website that shows somebody that it's more than a rock and roll joint, it's more than this, it's more than that. So we tried to put this DVD together, and I was amazed. I think our folks did a really good job with it. So Jorgen, is Jorgen around? You can do it? Roll it. World Café Live is an experience. We're all about music, we're all about food and beverage, we're all about creating content, and we're all about community. We created what is to the artist a big studio, and what is to the audience a small concert hall. Music is an important part of everybody's life, often taken for granted. I wanted to create a place where people knew that arts and music in particular was really what the place was all about. Part of being a community center is offering opportunities for members of the community to participate in ways they don't normally get to. It's really given me very great expectations.
We're taking a deep breath, and what was dreamed of 5-6 years ago is now a reality. And I think all of us here are totally overwhelmed.
It looks nicer, it sounds better, and it's serving our needs in a lot better way.
I knew I wanted to do something that spoke differently to artists and to audiences. I knew that WXPN at the time had the 7-year-old show called World Café that already spoke differently to artists and to audiences. And I thought that combining that and offering a physical extension for people to discover new music would be a terrific combination.
The sight lines are just unparalleled. There's no bad sight lines. There's not a bad seat in the house. There's not even half a bad seat in the house. And the quality of the sound in this place, every time I walk in, I think, wow.
Thank God there's a venue like this in Philadelphia now. To walk into a new venue with great PA, great crew, great hospitality. It's just a great pro venue.
We created an envelope that has the acoustics of a symphony hall, but for contemporary music. I love live music even in its rawest state, but I really appreciate seeing as polished a presentation as we can normally offer here.
I've been trying to find you, may I remind you, I'm under oath now. I've been trying to see you, cause I can see you want the truth now. I've been trying to tell you that I can tell you are a singular girl. Singular girl. Singular girl.
Our primary focus is to try to weave the kind of fabric we've woven here in other places in the country, but not to have them be Philadelphia's World Café Live, to have them be the World Café Live that is of and about the location where it is. So that's a lot to try and capture in a couple minutes, but that the messaging is pretty consistent. And as soon as we can get the laptop back up, which I know requires Jorgen to run and switch, we'll keep going. So, I mean, that basically tells you the story. 7 years in the making, XPN Studios, the most advanced in both recording and broadcast facility in the country. Downstairs Live, where you are, 300-seat, 600-700 people standing concert hall, bar and restaurant, mezzanine level up above. Hi, everybody up on the mezz. And upstairs Live, our 100-seat cafe with an intimate stage and bar. Programming, you know, we've had great success in bringing lots of people here who nobody's heard of who go on to win Grammys. That's a big part of what we do. And thank you. It would be embarrassing to have technical difficulties in your own house that brags about its technical skills. Our focus really, as I said, has been in building the brand and the platform and the team. And now our focus is shifting to profitability as being key, which really wasn't our primary concern. It was we learned from so many people that especially in an industry like this where you want to have multiple sites, everybody makes the mistake of underinvesting to make sure they get a maximum value from the initial model, and then they go and they grow and they fall on their face because they don't have the infrastructure to scale it up. A guest satisfaction checklist for us, amazing live musicians, great sound, clear sight lines, all the things that we were shooting for. We go back and we look and we measure it all the time. So ain't no stopping us now. Well, now it's time to grow. We do live music here 7 days on 2 stages, all kinds of innovative programming, all of which would translate to other locations for us. We've had more than 1 million guests since we opened. We have a database of over, I think it's 55,000 subscribers now. Beyond the music, we've really cranked up our food. We're thrilled to have recently added to our team Chef Jim Coleman, who's very well known and is going to oversee both Philly and Wilmington and bring a whole nother angle from the food and beverage side. We do lots of wine tasting dinners, beer fests, grilled cheese, and who knew that grilled cheese and craft beer tasting would sell out 2 months in advance, month after month. But again, to our wonderful staff for thinking these things. Lots of private events, weddings, bar mitzvahs, fundraisers, Founders Factory, business events, all of which are really a Trojan horse. They're great for us in terms of profitability. They're great margins, but they also bring new audiences here who might have been scared of this part of West Philly or where do you park, and they come here and they say, wow, this place is cool and it was easy, and they come back for the music. So that the event business has been a very important part of our formula, and lots of creative partnerships. We've gotten lots of awards. I'm not going to brag about them, but we've been very fortunate and been very well recognized locally, regionally, and nationally. And before I go on to the next part of expansion, part of my theme about keeping on, and how you sustain it is you've got to be innovative. And one of the things that we wanted to do from the start, and we waited till we got other aspects of the business together, is we wanted to create a nonprofit. We wanted to create the ability to avail the enterprise of other streams of revenue that we could not, as a for-profit, take advantage of. We have an interesting for-profit, nonprofit partnership next door. But nevertheless, for example, when we started our award-winning series every Saturday morning, Peanut Butter and Jams, which is for kids under 10 and the people who drive them, real music, we had the William Penn Foundation, Pew, and others all say, wow, we applaud you, that's great programming. And I said, good, we're losing our shirt, would you fund it? And they said, you're not a 501c3. And I said, that makes no sense. If you want to see our books to see how much money we're losing, we lose more than any 501c3. You like the output, you should fund it. And I actually convinced Pew after 3 years. My friends at Pew said, you're right, we would do that. I said, forget it, we're forming our own 501c3. Why am I going to, we want to get funding for these things. We don't want to waste our time convincing you to change your approach. So in the spring of 2008, a consortium of arts educators, artists, and entrepreneurs got together and started liveconnections.org, a legitimate IRS-approved 501c3. Although I will tell you that when the first 501c3 application response came back from the IRS, I said to our council, because you can't have too much crossover between the boards and this and that, and I said, if we don't admit that I'm the founder of both, then it really is a scam. So let's just say it, explain the safeguards, explain how WCL will benefit LCO, but not take advantage financially of it. And the response from the IRS came back, and basically I read it and I called our counsel and I said, if I'm going to go to jail, I think it should be for something other than helping kids improve their lives through music. So maybe this is a dumb idea. And she assured me that the examiner just really didn't get it, and we would straighten it all out. And the happy story is, without the details, she was right. So this is a really exciting part of what we do now. And the first initiative was what we call the Bridge Sessions. We launched them in the spring of '08. Bridge Sessions bring students of all ages and other underserved populations. We've done this with seniors. We've done this with physically and mentally challenged folks. And we bring them into World Café Live for very specific, tailored sessions, very interactive. It's really cool. So in the first 2 years, and the reason you see Peter Buffett is he's one of our supporters and one of our sponsors and came and did a benefit for LCO last spring. He's a very cool guy. He's a musician. He took his $90,000 that his dad gave him and put it into a home studio. He's a very successful, really interesting guy, Peter Buffett. Wrote a book recently about life is what you make it. So in the first 2 years, we did 56 sessions, had 4,000 participants, 36 schools and community groups, 30 different musicians involved, and gave away 4,200 soft pretzels, because everybody who comes to a bridge session gets a soft pretzel. Next on the horizon for LCO, we are expanding the bridge sessions each school term. We will be doing them in Wilmington when we open there in April. We've started a partnership that's very exciting with the Philadelphia Orchestra, where their musicians and our musicians play nice together. So programs that take you from Bach to beatbox, things like that, have been very, very interesting and successful for all involved. We've also started bridge sessions for business. The same magic of having these musicians teach kids how to listen to each other, how to create, how to connect. We've done it with a couple of companies, and it's awesome. It's great team building. So that will help fund the program. And we are now launching Classical Connections. So Live Connections will be presenting classical music at World Café Live, because everybody in the classical world who says they realize that there's a problem, we've said, yeah, do some homework, Liszt and Haydn and Brahms and Mozart. Their music was played in beer halls. People clapped when it moved them. The reason there were so many composers during that era, because they were rock stars. They got all the babes. They were cool. They were composers. It hasn't changed. The context has changed. So lighten up. Interact with your audience. Let some Curtis kids, do a set of Brahms and a set of Pink Floyd. Let's have some fun with it. So that's moving forward through Live Connections. And now Pew, my friends, want to fund a project which is classical collaborations, where we're going to take a classical composer and a contemporary artist like Ingrid Michaelson, Charlie Hunter, people like that, put them together to do new compositions. So we hope we qualify for that funding. And the benefits, again, not all altruistic. There are a little financial benefit for World Café Live. We have a lot of series in here, and although the nonprofit pays very little, it pays something for times when the venue might otherwise be dark. But it's great for our community connections. It's great to get foundation and corporate support we might not otherwise get. It's great to have these education partnerships. I grew up in Philadelphia with PSFS Bank giving every second grader, God, does this date me, but we all got savings books. And sure enough, when we were in high school, we thought the only bank was PSFS. And so somebody who I've known since those days came to one of these sessions and said, I know exactly what you're doing. You're brainwashing the next generation to think only World Café Live for live music. I said, you got me. So it has lots of benefits. Now to move on, World Café Live at the Queen. You're seeing a picture on the left of a building at 5th and Market Street in Wilmington as it looked in about 1930. In the late 1880s, the building was built as an apartment house and hotel. In 1910, there was a terrible fire. In 1912, they imploded all the rubble from the inside of the building, poured new concrete, even back then, on a sloped floor, and created a wonderful vaudeville theater called the Queen Theater that opened in 1917. In 1929 and 30, when TV came along and killed vaudeville, it became one of the country's great silver screens. In 1959, the Queen Theater went dark. When we started construction about a year and a half ago, it looked like the picture you see on the right, as opposed to the way it looked back when. On April 1st of 2011, it will look like this when it opens as World Café Live at the Queen Theater in Wilmington. It will have an upstairs live restaurant, a downstairs live music hall and venue, an incredible balcony that is part of the original Queen Theater that will hold about 150 people with its own dining space, 2 XPN studios overlooking the balcony and the main venue. It's this place on steroids. It's about a third larger in each room, but still allows that intimate, authentic exchange that is our brand. Incredible sound, incredible sight lines, not even 3 columns to hold anything up. And it's a very exciting proposition for us. So it's a $24 million project in the worst economic times since the Great Depression. It's a unique collaboration of economic development, both by a private developer, the city, the foundations, the corporate community, and individual leaders. I'll show you where the funds come from in a second. And they courted us. Did I say they courted it? Yeah, they courted us. Because we've become a poster child for urban rejuvenation. When we opened this in West Philly 6 years ago, there was almost nothing around us. You may say there's still nothing around us, but there's $3 billion of development planned around us. I'm not taking all the credit, but even Jerry Sweeney from Brandywine Realty Trust will tell you, when he was building the Cira Center and selling people that a big, cool neighborhood was coming, he was buying lunch upstairs here for prospects. It's a very interesting story, how the arts and innovative entrepreneurialism can be a huge tool. There have been a lot of very cool studies funded by people like the Rockefeller Foundation that tell the story. But not only is it an economic beacon, but to take a building like this that has been a symbol of the urban blight that has been downtown Wilmington, especially Market Street, for 50 years and turn it into a beacon of urban hope is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us and for the city. So we're very excited that they asked us. The 500 block of Market Street, our building is down on the right. Market Street in Wilmington has 10 blocks. Anybody know Wilmington at all? So you've got a very healthy central business district. You've got a pretty healthy waterfront development. You've got 10 blocks. This isn't the Bronx. It's 10 blocks that has been a dead zone for decades. And Wilmington has a $300 million plan to rejuvenate that and make it a really cool place, and somehow we're the centerpiece for that plan. For us, we made it pretty clear. We can't afford the bricks and sticks, especially if you do something as stupid as buy the Queen Theater for us. And of course, that's what they did, because that place was $10 million just to put a popcorn stand. There was nothing about it that worked under today's codes. We've got very favorable leasing terms, so I don't mean to pass over the fact that, I'll repeat it, $21 million that makes no economic sense in terms of a real estate return, but is purely being done to create an anchor and to instigate the tipping point, has been put up for us to come there, to rehab this building totally to our spec. We have very favorable lease terms and a very favorable operating cost structure. It's generated significant new investor interest because we are raising equity for the first time from new investors since before we opened in Philly. And if Jeff Bodel, my counsel at Morgan Lewis, wasn't in the room, I'd say to you, if you knew anybody who was an accredited investor who might be interested, find me, okay? But we are open to new investors for the first time. Very synergistic with Philly. We analyzed very carefully, would this complement us or would it cannibalize us? And we've decided from every perspective, it's very synergistic. There's great economies of scale. We don't have to replicate everything to have Wilmington. The major media market for both XPN and WCL allows us to leverage the media coverage as well. It's a very complicated deal. I was a real estate lawyer for 20 years doing pretty sophisticated transactions. My eyes glazed over. But as simplistically as we can say, there is a for-profit owner, part of the developer, Buccini Poland Group. You have to have that at the root to take advantage of the tax credits. Then there's $12 million of new market tax and historic tax credits that flow through that development entity. Then there's a nonprofit that we created called the Light Up the Queen. The Light Up the Queen is a foundation whose mission is to light up the Queen and then to maintain it as a community asset with the kind of programming that just happens to match what we do. And then the Light Up the Queen is the master tenant, and it subleases the whole place to us with certain parameters on what the activities will be there. The sources are listed here. It's $24 million, including our $3 million, a little for FF&E, and a couple million in working capital to get it to financial stability, and the uses of those funds. Now, the point of showing you the model is a lot of people look at this and say, something doesn't smell right. You know how you just play too loosely with for-profit and nonprofit. So I say, okay, let's think about it. Let's step back about what doesn't smell right. In most cities, a building like this, there's two things that happen. Either it falls down, or as happened with the Baptist Temple in Philly, to survive and be rehabbed, it takes 10 years, $50 million on average. It's 75% public money and 25% private money. And at the end of the day, you have a performing arts center, nonprofit, that bleeds like a stuck pig because it's an outdated model and it's not sustainable, that you need to endow with another $50 million. So that's been the model. Now let's look at this one that doesn't smell so good. You take a building that's really about to fall down, you bring in a private developer who says, we got to do this lean and mean, takes advantage of all the different financing sources that are out there, builds a community behind it. In 3 years, $25 million with 75% private money, 25% public money, turns it over with all the risk on a private operator. So I think that one smells pretty good. And it's a story we look forward to telling. And I should have been doing this while I talked, but here's some pictures about what we've done there. And you can see it's starting to come to life. It's actually a lot further along. Oh, this is cool. We found 3 murals that nobody knew were there when we took away the layers and layers and layers of stuff. We totally recreated the medallion in the ceiling. When we took over the building, you could see daylight through it. We always said the Queen is crying because she was always crying. There was always water dripping through the place. So it's a very exciting opportunity. We hope you'll come check it out in April. And our strategy is very much to create a circuit of WCLs that artists who we discover and heritage artists who we work with can tour. So within a day or a half a day drive, we would like to be able to have our artists go from one World Café Live to another. As many of you know, just like the radio show, what we're about is giving heritage artists a place. Some of them are on the way out in their career. Some of them are doing different things than what they became known for. But we also really love to present new artists. And we've presented many, many artists who've outgrown us, and that's fine. My take on the music industry and its future is 10 years ago, and this is real quick and simple. 10 years ago, you had these dinosaurs called record labels. Remember them? If you wanted to make it in the music business, you needed $1 million to do a video that played on this MTV that used to do music. And record labels released maybe 60 new releases across all genres a week and put big money behind them. Fast forward to today, if you've got a Mac and you've got a band and you've got a website, you got a record label. So there's 60,000 new releases a day. It's chaos. The opportunity is who gets to be the tastemaker? Who's going to sort through the chaos so that when you have a precious evening out with your buddy, your friends, your significant other, your kids, your parents, because it's very intergenerational, who are you going to trust if you want to go hear the next great thing in some place that's not 30,000 people? That's a great venue. That's us. That's, in a nutshell, what we're about. You know you're going to be treated well by a great staff. You're going to get something good to drink and eat. You're going to have a great professionally presented experience. If you really want to know who it is and what they're about, you can find out on the website ahead of time, and you trust us to give you a great evening. And you just may catch the next Corinne Bailey Rae, KT Tunstall, Adele, all those folks. So I also am very interested. We want to be a big fish in a small pond. So we're in conversations on places like Hartford, Newark, pioneers. Again, economic development money is nice for us in these times. Baltimore, Washington, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Louisville, and Istanbul, just making sure you're awake. Although someday it would be great to be able to go international with it. So, to tie it all together, what makes it sustainable? Continuing to innovate, continuing to invigorate, continuing to listen to, we don't have customers, but to our fans, to our guests, to our staff that bring so much energy to it, and continuing to chase our passions. So I'll say thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed this program from the Founder Factory. For more information, visit phillystartupleaders.org. We produce this program in the studios of Professional Podcasts in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. For everyone at the Philly Startup Leaders and Founder Factory, this is Steve Lubetkin. Thank you for joining us, and take good care.